So welcome to the next episode in GraphQL in practice. And in this episode we're gonna look shortly about GraphQL API documentation, how you do it, why is it good, and also we're going to implement a more complex type. So let me just show you a quick thing before we start. So that we can kick off with a problem that we had in the previous episode. So I'm gonna quickly change screen here. And if you watched the previous episode, we had a problem with fetching the GraphQL schema. And to get this working is essential for you to follow up if you watched on the previous episode. So what I had to do to get it working was to navigate to program.cs and comment out this use HTTPS redirection. So during localhost development on my own machine and maybe on your machine, you will experience some trouble having use HTTPS redirection activated. So with that being said and that commented out, we can move forward. So when you are developing a REST API, you probably, or maybe if you just Google it, there is something called Swagger. That is something that is a tool to do documentation about our REST API, so that a consumer can know which different endpoints the consumer can hit, what kind of body that you need to send to that endpoint to receive the data that you need. So this is necessary if you have a public API, or if you have a private API, or like an internal API for maybe only your company. Because how are they going to know how to use the API if there isn't any documentation? So here comes one of the pros with using GraphQL, because it has an kind of like an internal functionality already built into the different GraphQL implementations to do some documentation. So this works because it has something called introspection. GraphQL introspection is kind of like a self-awareness to query an API to get what fields, what queries can I search for. So let me just do a demonstration of this to continue where we ended last time. We had a simple root query and it was just returning a simple string, and the field that you call query is me. So to put that into practice, let's just bring Postman. I'm going to draw that window. I'm going to move that window to the screen soon. Just gonna hit F5 to boost up a server. So as you see here, we could write the query me, and we receive this hello, this is me information. So let's do an example of introspection. So I have a query here and I post it in like this, and I let you examine for some seconds what I just pasted into this query window. So there's something called __ schema. So that is the internal query that you can send to the GraphQL API, and you could query for the fields query type. and the subfield name, subtype fields, and name for the fields. So let's hit this query, shall we? Alright, so here we got the response. See if I can, no. Oh, I cannot zoom in, so I hope you see something. So we got the response, and you can see that we have a root query, and we have the fields, and name is called me. So this is a way to actually send back to the API consumer information about what can you query. So to use something more, a better tool for this than Postman, at least currently, let's start something called GraphQL Playground. So I'm just going to move the window here, and let's paste in the endpoint for this URL endpoint. GraphQL, open, and now we have like a tab called Docs. So let's examine that. Docs. And here you can see we have a query named me, and we have information about what does this query return, what kind of data, and it's a string, and that is true. Here we receive it yet again, me. Hello, this is me. So that's a string. So this is a very powerful way to inform the API consumer that they can query for me, and they will receive a string. So let's put this to practice yet again and do some other stuff. So we have this me resolver. Let's add a field and something called description, and we can like information about current user, current logged in user. Let's save that, and let's see if we can bring the debug here. Let's see if I can find it somewhere. Debug. Let's restart. And now we shall see, I shall bring the GraphQL Playground to the screen here yet again. Let's just do something like this to refresh it. Here, do you see something interesting? Information about current logged in user. This is a very good way to document the API for a consumer. So that is really something that is nifty indeed. So let's try to do something a little bit fancier, shall we? So let's stop this. Now we can move to the next part of this live stream, of this part of GraphQL in practice, and let's implement a more complex type than just returning a string. So we could just define it in this in the same file for simplicity, and let's call it user. Let's have a prop called user, maybe name, name, and it's type string, and just an email, and it's a string as well. No, I've done something stupid. Oh. This is what is happening when you are doing Visual Basic.NET all the days long. It should be like this. Thank you, Visual Basic. Public string. So, in order to get this to be usable when you are defining a GraphQL query, you have to declare a class that is inheriting ObjectGraphType. So let's create another one here called userType, and it inherits ObjectGraphType. And we could do it as well like this. It's a generic of user. And then we have a constructor. And in the constructor, we can give it a name. Let's give it the name user information. Or maybe not user type. And description should be of what I previously wrote, but now on the correct place, user information. And then we have a field, and it should be of us. Let's see how we should do this right. We should do it as an anonymous function. Name, field, email. And now you see that you have some kind of alternatives. And let's use the description, and we can give it a name. The user email address. Let's do it for the field name, description. The user name. I think that will be enough. Let's see what I'm doing wrong here. It might be... Oh. Sorry for this, I'm having some trouble with my Visual Basic.NET habit. Let's do it like this. Field string graph type. I will do some research about that. I totally forget the C# syntax for this because I'm doing Visual Basic.NET like 95% of the time. So the first argument for this will be the field name, and then we can give it the description, the user name. String type, and it's email. Description. I just let you think about this and watch the screen for some seconds. So we defined this user type. Now we should use this in the query field called me. So let's change this string graph type to user type. Now we are returning a string, and this is not valid because it's expecting an object with some properties, name and email. So let's just return a dummy user class. Let's awesome coder and email awesome coder.io. Yeah. So let's say this, and now we shall see if this thing works out. Might explode. So let's launch it. Yes, so I moved the GraphQL playground to the screen, and let's hit the docs tab, shall we? Voila! Now we have the available queries, and we have only me. And you can see we have the description, information about current logged in user, type details, its user information, and we could see what kind of different things, the fields that it will send back that you can query for. So we have email. If we click that, we get it the user email address. Well, it's obviously in this example, but there will be other queries that is maybe not always obvious for the API consumer. So this description, this information will be very important for our API consumer. And we also see which kind of type that field is of. It's string. So let's hit the query window, and now we take name, and we get awesome coder. I'm not one of them, but usually are. So name, email. Yeah, now you get the email for that awesome coder. That is you. So to wrap this short live stream, we learned about a schema. That is what kind of fields, what kind of queries you can do to the GraphQL API. We learned that GraphQL has something called introspection queries, and that is you can send a query to receive which kind of fields, what kind of queries you can do, and what kind of what is the meaning of a query. Like in this example, we have the me query that is returning user information about the current logged in user. Something that is used surely a lot across web applications where you are authenticated. You want to have some self-awareness information, profile information. So, and we have defined a complex type, and we have used the internal ways of declaring API documentation. You can give the consumer of the API information about, in this case, you can query for me, and you can query for the fields name and email. Obvious queries in this example, but it will be great importance of queries that is not so obvious. So thank you for watching this stream, and if you want, hit that subscribe button to get a notification about the next episode. But till next time, I wish you all the best.